The saying that you often hear in the United States. You may hear a mother or a teacher telling a child, well, you need to get a good education because if not, you'll end up flipping burgers. And that means that, these fast food jobs are considered menial jobs. They don't pay very well, and it's something you don't want to do, but it seems easy. And I would argue that that's not really true. Physically difficult, long hours, not nice people, but they also require a level of reading. Let me explain more. So, on Friday we went to a fast food restaurant. My husband and my daughter, who's 21 months, and I went to a fast food restaurant. It wasn't super busy. It was about 9 o'clock. It was a little bit late for the breakfast crowd. The young lady, very nice young lady, who took our order at the register was just having a really hard time. It took her a long time to find the right keys. You could see her looking for the keys. You could see her just really confused about what to press. We had to repeat several times what we wanted. And then when we actually got our food, I was missing part of my order, and my husband didn't get what he wanted at all. He got something totally different. I looked at my husband after we sat down. I said it quiet. She couldn't read. And it was obvious that she didn't have the reading skills enough to even find what she needed to on the register and to perform that one task. And this type of thing, unfortunately, is not unusual. So, I was at a fast food restaurant where you pick what you want. There's like a line and somebody picks what you get. And I had ordered it online because at that time my daughter was small and it was a big ordeal to wait. We were going to go pick it up and we had to wait over 30 minutes just to get our food. I mentioned it to the woman. I said, we ordered this online and it said it was ready. And then the woman behind the counter said, oh, well, I've never done one before where it was by app. And the look on her face was one of humiliation. And I realized that woman couldn't read very well. And that was why it was taking her a long time to get our food and other people's food. And a lot of them, at least 3 people there, had pickup orders. And this woman couldn't read well enough to read our pickup orders and to get what we needed. And so that was really affecting customer service at this restaurant. And again, I could tell that she was just really embarrassed. And unfortunately, this thing, particularly in South Carolina, where I live, is not that uncommon. There are, by official estimates, there are 25% of people who can't read well enough to do basic tasks, like run a cash register or look at an app, look at information on an app and use it to make food. That's a huge number, 1 in 4. I don't think it's an accident that the people that were having difficulty with these tasks were brown, and they were in a rural area, because in South Carolina in particular, historically, there are some things that make it still a very, very segregated society. So in the town where I live, there's a little bit of a mix as far as schools. It's not totally segregated, but where we were on Friday, there are whole schools that don't have any white people at all. They're all black people. And all the white people go to either their parents drive them to like more suburban schools or more rural schools where there's a mix between white and black people and they're considered better. They're able to get in a school where you have to apply to go to. But for the most part, most of the white people in those communities go to private schools, and they're called segregation academies. And traditionally in the 1960s, these schools were opened because the federal government had said you had to integrate schools. You had to have black, white, Latino, everyone needs to go to school together, Asian, everyone has to go to school together. That was a federal law on public schools. So to get around that, these segregation academies, and that's what they were called, were formed. And they're relatively low cost, but they generally only still admit white students. They're starting to have a tiny bit of diversity. I know the one here has a lot of students are not white, but they're still very segregated schools. And the public schools that do exist, particularly in these cities where most of the white people go to segregation academies, still, they're ignored, they're underfunded, and students just don't get a good education because, again, the people in charge, mostly there are kids that attend private schools, so they don't really care about these schools. And up until recent history, also, these schools were really underfunded. That started to change. But there's a really good documentary called Corridor Shame, which is the schools that are east of Interstate 85. There was actually a lawsuit in the early 2000s that took about 10 years to settle because these schools were not even funded enough for them to properly operate. Again, that's beginning to change. There has been some improvement in some of these schools. The schools are still considered very poor quality, especially in these segregated areas. And this is not something that just affects those individuals who are trying to just work and make ends meet and have a job. who are struggling even to keep up with their jobs. It also affects society. So in another town about 25-30 minutes away, I was talking to an older woman who was really involved in that town with the leadership, and she's involved in a political situation. She told me that town was about to get a Chick-fil-A, and that would be a huge thing for this community because they just had very few places to eat. And Chick-fil-A provides jobs. They actually pay pretty well for the type of work it is. They're one of the better employers for that. And Chick-fil-A came, they looked at the area, and they said, we can't have a restaurant here because we don't have the level of education that's needed for our staff. So they recognized that their staff needed education and needed to be able to read well and to think well to operate the Chick-fil-A. So that community doesn't have a Chick-fil-A. To go to the nearest Chick-fil-A, it's probably about 45 minutes from where I am at. So people would go to this Chick-fil-A. It would go from the surrounding communities. So even when it comes to what you might call menial jobs or jobs that service industry jobs, reading is even important in those jobs. You don't have to have a job that's considered professional to need reading. Also wanted to point out that the graduation rate in this community is over 80%. It's closer to 90% most places now. So we've got young people who are graduating and can't read. And is that really equitable? I would say it's not. I've had a lot of issues communicating with people at doctor's offices, by written instruction, pharmacies, and I'll put that in another video maybe down the road. Maybe I'll do a whole series on this, why it's important to read in every job. My husband's seen it at his work in construction. Just people don't have the skills to read in this area. And that's very, very sad. And it makes me think about society and what society values. So I'd love to hear from you on this. Please type in your comments, where have you seen it, where people have had trouble reading and you noticed, or in your life, in your families, have you seen relatives who struggle with reading, or maybe even yourself, and how has that affected your life?